Okay, folks. Illiquidity, market or asset lack of liquidity. So we are hearing about the risk of illiquidity. Again, this has been a problem since the great financial crisis in GFC, the way it's called, since 2008. Now, what is illiquidity? What does that mean, and what is its effect? It means that there is no bidding for assets. Now, what is bidding? Bidding means that when you want to sell something, let's say a house, let's say you want to sell a house at $500,000, and if you're and you list it at $500,000, but if it stays in the market for 2 years without being sold, then the market is illiquid. Now, if you sell it, let's say in 2 weeks or in a month or in 2 months, then the market is liquid. There was bidding for that house. The same thing is in the stock market and in the financial system for the financial assets. If you want to sell, let's say, when you sell $100,000 of stocks, they get sold instantly, like 1/10 of a second or something. That is a liquid market. If you want to sell $500 billion of treasuries, right? If you sell them in a day or two without big price movements, that is a liquid market. If you cannot sell them without dropping your price 5% or 10%, that is an illiquid market. There's no bidding for that price. So that is what that is the fear, and that has been the fear since 2008. So, but what is the practical effect on the ground? Right, this is all hearing. So, remember what happened in Cyprus in 2015, I think, 14, the Cypriot crisis, banking crisis. Your assets were illiquid and they were revalued by, I think, 50% cut, which means that if you have $1 million of stocks, next day a number is changed on the computer because there's no bidding, and your stocks from $1 million now have a value on the computer of $500,000. That is called a decline from illiquidity. What does that do? Because if you are in the top 10%, now how does that affect the economy, the supply chains, and the consumption? You are an elite in the top 10%. The top 10% is doing 50% of the consumption, which means that the rest, the 90%, is doing the other 50%. So the breakdown is most probably top 10% is consuming the 50% of the output and imports. The next 40%, the middle class, is consuming, let's say, 30% of the output and imports, and the bottom 50%, the poor, are consuming the 20% left of the output and imports, basically getting close to not affording food and housing. So imagine now what the top 10% does. They have these assets valued at that level, let's say 6,000 points of S&P. A decline of illiquidity would be that a week later or next day, S&P would be revalued from 6,000 to 3,000. So you lose instantly 50% of your wealth. Just a number on the computer. What does that do to you in reality? You can no longer consume as before, because as a top 10%, you have these assets, you go to the bank and you borrow against those assets. So if you have $10 million of assets, you go and borrow $10 million in the bank, and then you live like a king because you have a collateralized loan. Right, so if your value, because of the decline of liquidity or illiquidity decline, means that you can no longer borrow $10 million, you can now borrow only $5 million. Now you're half as rich as before. So imagine that for the top 10%, your assets drop by 50% in a week. That is the decline of illiquidity, with direct effect on the ground, meaning that the top 10% would no longer be able to consume 50% of the output and imports, which means that the middle class and the poor will consume what the top 10% would not be able to consume, which means that it's good for the 90% and would be not good for the top 10%. That is why I keep saying a collapse of the stock market is a good thing. A decline of liquidity or illiquidity drop is a great thing for the economy, because the middle class and the poor will have now access to real goods and services which are being consumed by the top 10%. So the other positive effect of the decline of liquidity or illiquid decline is that manufacturing, actually factories, will start being built, because you will no longer be able to just type up a digit on computer and that Intel would have that much of a high of a value. So the supply chains now have become hedge funds. Manufacturing corporations have become hedge funds. They no longer produce, they just do financial engineering to increase the value of the assets in the financial market, which means that supply chains break down, output declines, people get poorer, food riots, inflation out of control, and so on and so forth. So again, an illiquid decline is coming. Congress and the elites will delay it, but they cannot delay it further than the point of food riots, which are coming. Food riots are coming because the Western supply chains are no longer producing anything. You have high-frequency trading, the cable between Chicago and Tokyo. They just type up digits on computers. They type up values of assets just for the top 10%, who consume 50% of the output and imports, and they leave the other 50% for the middle class and the poor. So again, this has been going on since 2008, but it's coming down to the point that the bottom 50%, the poor, are getting hungry. We are having pockets of hunger in the West. So food riots coming as the elites refuse to acknowledge reality, that inflation is out of control. And once these food riots coming, the elites would have no other option but to stop bidding stocks and bonds, and they will let it fall, and they'll start focusing on actually producing stuff. So again, illiquidity decline is a great liquidity decline or illiquid drop of financial assets is a fantastic thing. It should have been left to happen in 2008, but Obama and Trump stopped it. It caused a decline of output. It caused inflation out of control, and it is now causing hunger and food scarcity in the West. Food riots coming. Illiquidity decline is coming. And again, to finish this up, everything is bad. Everything will get worse. No light at the end of the tunnel. Have no hope. The worst is yet to come. You have a fantastic day. Fantastic.